Ray, we're talking about in the NFL where this Matt LaFleur, who I'm a Packers fan, I've never heard of him before, and now he's the head coach. O and I believe Rodgers would be included in that. And O was talking about in the hockey world, like that just was never a part of the conversation when he was playing. But there's got to be a few players in the NHL now. Crosby comes to mind, obviously McDavid.
But what are you talking about, though, Brian? Are you talking about...
I'm not saying they make the call.
Or in that meeting, just informed?
Informed. Don't you think so, Ray? Informed. Like up to the second updates in terms of who we think we're going to be hiring for the team.
Yeah, but I think that happened in the past, too. I mean, do you think Pittsburgh was making a coaching change and Mario Lemieux didn't know about it, or L.A. was going to make a coaching change and Gretz had nothing to do with it? Or like there's players of some level that are way more informed. I know, for example, I would assume that we had this ownership thing going on in Hartford, and I always assumed Ron Francis knew a hell of a lot more about it than I did. And so I think that's probably been the case for a long time. But now there's certainly more, seems to be more connection to your star players and the decisions of the franchise in particular, because you're paying guys $100 million. And even more so, like, Aaron Rodgers, you don't just get a coach. You're getting an offensive coordinator eventually. It impacts everything that he's doing, and he just signed it was $100 million, wasn't it?
Yeah, highest paid player in the history of the NFL.
So I would think they have it, and it's but I will say I don't think I'd be surprised if Peter Chiarelli said to Connor McDavid, "We're thinking of making a coaching change to Ken Hitchcock. What do you think?" I would be surprised.
Players have a lot of power. Remember a couple of years ago, the Greek Freak? They fired Kidd, and he called him, and he said, "You want me to call the owner and,
try to keep you around, keep your gig?"
Can you imagine a player saying that to the coach? "You want me to call the owner to keep your gig?" He's like, "Nah, don't worry about it. I'm fired."
Well, I think that's where you can generalize a little bit, but the idea of the personality of a hockey player would be to go along with everything. Like, hey, we're hiring this guy. Even if they did say, "What do you think?" he'd probably be like, "Oh, if you like it, then I'm on board."
Dude, the only conversation I was in with the same guy, Ron Francis, we'd be called into the coach's office, and it was just this: "Who do you want in your left wing?" That was it. It wasn't. We weren't called up. Maybe he was, and I wasn't invited, but it was never up to the GM's office saying, I can't imagine being in a position where someone said, "You think we should fire the coach?"
Nobody asked me.
No. I was usually the reason.
The only time anyone from management ever called me was to tell me to move.
You've been traded. Get the hell out of my city.
We talked to a lot of people, and we're going to make a choice here, or we're going to make a change, and you're it.
Well, what I will say about, if management ever went to a player, regardless of the sport and the stature of the player, and actually posed the question, "What do you think?" you better be prepared for, if he says, "No, I don't want that guy," you can't hire the guy. Like, what's the point of seeking counsel or feeling like you have some sort of an obligation to go to, let's say it's Aaron Rodgers. Let's say the GM goes to him and says, "We're thinking this Matt LaFleur guy, he's a really impressive interview." What if Rodgers said, "No, I don't want that guy. Don't hire him." Then what do you do?
Well,
probably not hiring him.
Then you're a little stuck. I mean, I can't imagine that Rodgers would have been in the meetings, like the interview process. So you're already far enough down the road that you've kind of already decided you're going to offer him the job, aren't you?
Yes, and that would be terrifying, again, if you're the GM. Like, if you're the GM and you're like, "I've decided to hire this guy, and I'm going to call up Rodgers and tell him," that's got to be a terrifying conversation, because if you get a lukewarm response, what if Rodgers was like, "Who is that guy?"
That's possible too.
It is possible. Then you'd have to explain who he is. Then you'd have to hang up the phone if you're the GM, and you'd be like, "I'm in big trouble. I just hired a guy, and I don't know if Rodgers likes him or knows him."
Not the same level here, though, Brian, but Ilya Kovalchuk signed a free agent contract at LA. Do you think he signed to play for Willie Desjardins on the fourth line?
No, he didn't do that.
So at the end of the day, the $100 million they're paying Rogers, there's still somebody that's worth more in the organization. Like they've got to make the choice they think's the best. Like, I don't. It would be hard because you can't ignore the involvement of the player anymore. You just can't.
Well, I agree, Ray, but you also can't. I've seen situations where you give the player too much power, and you got a monster on your hands.
Well, what would
all of a sudden the player thinks he's running the whole team.
Yes,
right.
In video meetings, everything.
Yeah, and heck, it's even bad when the coach has too much power. The coach is a coach. He's making personnel decisions on who he should trade for. I mean, he can have input, but most coaches are not very good general managers because they don't have the patience to wait for a move to play itself out. Look the way coaches are. They want the result like now or yesterday. And so the more power guys get, in a lot of cases, it just doesn't work. There's got to be a check and a balance somewhere.
What would be more uncomfortable to be as a player, as an athlete, if your GM came to you and was seeking your counsel on whether or not he should fire your current coach, or seeking your counsel on who should be hired as the new coach?
Firing, for sure. You become, as much as you probably dislike your coach or you have differences, you have family parties and you get to know people, and they're just to decide his fate would be awfully difficult.
Just say I was going to say that initially too, but just think back at the times when
you hated
there was
them.
A coach. Oh my God! And you're like, do whatever you want with them, because this guy has had, to borrow O's phrase, he's had a toilet seat on top of me for about 3 weeks.
Yeah, true.
It's a nasty business sometimes.